Welcome to the show. I am Chris Graham, joined by Scott German. We're going to talk UVA basketball after the 70-68 win at Michigan last night in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, the final ACC Big Ten Challenge for Virginia, as play in that will wrap up tonight. Next year, starting an ACC SEC Challenge. But Virginia rallying from 11 down last night with defense, some balanced offense, and a tough, gritty win for this Virginia team, Scott.
Absolutely. Everything you said. And I'm exhausted today because I'm functioning on about 3 hours sleep. Those late games are tough for us old folks. But yeah, that's Virginia basketball that we missed seeing pretty much all last year. And, the beauty about that is that Virginia won that game on the defensive end of the floor last night. And that's old school Virginia basketball.
Oh, yeah. That's, you said, Scott, the first time that we've seen Virginia basketball like that, in the past year or so. I think it's the first time since the 2018-2019 national title team. I mean, honestly, the vintage kind of ran out around that time. The 2020 team won the ACC regular season championship. That team was Sam Hauser and Jay Huff and Mamadi Diakite, all of whom were playing professional basketball. But really, the glory years of 2013 to 2019, when you had the Malcolm Brogdons and Justin Andersons and Joe Harris's and Leonard Parentes, and then, of course, the group that won the title, DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, those teams were the stock that Tony Bennett's foundation was built upon. This team reminds me of those teams. Reese Beekman kind of reminds me of. He has a lot of Malcolm Brogdon in him, for example. I look at Jaden Gardner and Ben Vanderplas both as being guys who play like Anthony Gill, at the 4 spot. This team just has tough guys up and down it. And I don't want to say that the other guys weren't tough. It's just the mix after the title team until this year, because this team is pretty much last year's team with Ben Vanderplas and a couple of freshmen who are going to be playing bigger roles down the stretch. But this team just seems like it's got all the pieces, kind of like that 2018-2019 team that won the national championship.
Yeah, I agree. If there's we're razor thin close, I believe, to being able to jump to that next level. And I think we know what the next level would be to be a Final Four team. If we can get a little more consistency from, I think Gardner's pretty consistent, but certainly Ahmad Franklin, Shedrick is real close to making that final step from being pretty good to, pretty awesome, and get some development from the sub. Tony played what, eight last night? 7?
He played 9 guys actually.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, a couple guys only got a few minutes. When I look at the stats here real quick, the minutes were Ryan Dunn got 5 minutes. Francisco Cafaro only got 4 minutes because of his foul trouble, and McNeely got 10. Vanderplas off the bench got 24. So yeah, you did have 4 guys, but Dunn really got his minutes because of the foul trouble for Shedrick and Cafaro. Vanderplas stepped in nicely playing at 5. So versatility with that also was a hallmark of that 2018-2019 team. You had guys like DeAndre Hunter, Braxton Key who could play multiple positions. Ben Vanderplas gives this team an interesting dynamic with his ability to play both offensively and defensively multiple positions.
Yeah, Ben Vanderplas is, to me, could represent to Virginia what Brady Mannix represented to North Carolina last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and, you go back talking about the rotation. McKinney, Dunn, I think they need a little more playing time. And here's the ironic, or maybe not ironic, but here's the thing about that is we're moving into the time of the year where rotations are tightened up. And some of these guys that aren't getting a lot of minutes, traditionally you would think, oh, maybe the minutes are going to even dry up more because we're getting away from the non-conference schedule. We're starting to move into the conference schedule. Well, we do Saturday against Florida State, but if you've watched the ACC this year, it's pretty weak. And the way Virginia's playing right now, there's going to be potentially a lot of blowout opportunities. So these guys are going to get more minutes on the floor if things, play out the way they look like they're going to play out. So the weakness of the league, especially towards the bottom, is going to give these guys probably a lot more minutes than they normally would be getting as December turns into January,
Well, and that's going to be good. I mean, if that ends up being the case, Isaac McNeely is going to get minutes anyway. He's going to be the first guard off the bench. Ben Vanderplas is going to be and is the first forward off the bench. And so that's, if the rotation gets down to 7, those will be your 7, your 5 starters, and then McNeely, and then Vanderplas. Interesting. Tane Murray didn't get off the bench last night. He's your 10th guy. I mean, this is a deep team. If you get opportunities with some garbage time minutes late in games, more of those this year, it's a chance for these guys to develop. I mean, you can get only so good in practice. I mean, of course, there's a lot of talent on that Virginia roster, and those practices are pretty spirited, but you get better in practice, but you really see what guys can do in game situations. Even though if it's garbage time situations, you're still playing other ACC athletes, and in less controlled environments than you play in practice. So, we'd love to see guys like Ryan Dunn, get more playing time. Tane Murray get some more playing time in those kind of situations. Maybe even in some games, working them in first halves of games. Ryan Dunn got some first half minutes for a couple games because he did so well. I think it was Fairleigh Dickinson or Monmouth? I'm thinking of last year, Fairleigh Dickinson. The Monmouth game, he did well in that game, and then he earned some playing time in the first half, I think, in the Baylor game. So you'd love to see those guys getting some late game minutes that can maybe translate into earlier game minutes, like last night. Last night, Caden Shedrick gets in foul trouble. Francisco Cafaro gets in foul trouble. So Ryan Dunn gets 5 minutes playing at the big spot. That kind of thing is only going to be helpful to this team if those guys can develop in season and then be available in late February into March into April.
Yeah, and as I said, this is the time of year. We've got a few more non-conference games left. One of which is Houston. So certainly that's not a pastry by any means. But yeah, the opportunities are going to be there for these guys, and it's going to be interesting to see just how to watch their progression and to see how Tony incorporates that into the offense. So I have a question for you. And I was thinking about it, just watching the game last night from my perspective, and you and I both see Virginia play both in person and on TV as much as anybody, if not more. Do you think Tony's once and for all completely shed the stigma that he's set in his ways and he'll never change his philosophies? Because just watching him now, it looks like we're seeing Tony just be so adaptive to the personnel that he has on the floor. Do you get that feeling at all?
Oh yeah. Even as recently as last year, there was a lot of mover blocker offense, the sides offense, some people call it, that didn't feel like it was working a lot last year, to be honest. Especially when you've got a point guard. You got 2 point guards on the floor, K.A. Clark and Reese Beekman, but you got an NBA talent in Reese Beekman at point guard. The mover blocker offense relies a lot on, the point guard kind of just moving the ball around and, really not creating as much. I mean, it's more like the team creates shots with the motion offense. And so, yeah, this year you're seeing a lot of sets that look more like NBA sets. Jerry Ratcliffe and I talked on a podcast. It was this summer after the Italy trip that there was a lot of talk about how Tony was using that Italy trip for lots of things. I mean, for team bonding and that kind of thing, but also to kind of, play around with, some more pro type sets. And the game against that last opponent, whose name escapes me because that was back in July, but the last opponent was a team full of NBA prospects, guys who, in Europe who would be eligible for the NBA draft coming up. And actually, there were a lot of scouts at those games looking at how they would play against, a top college team. You might remember Virginia lost the first game by 20 plus points, came back and won the second game. And it was a much faster paced game. I think the score of the second game was in the 90s. Both teams were in the 90s in that game. And so Tony was using that to try to test these ideas out. Hey, can we run off screens differently? Can we have some sets where we have a guy stationed in the short corner on the side of a play and maybe kick it out and see what happens after a pick and roll at the top? Stuff that you don't always see. They're still running a lot of that sides offense, that motion mover blocker offense, but they're doing different things because they've got personnel who can run it. I mean, the personnel that he has at his disposal this year is akin. I know I'm going to be sacrilegious here when I say this. I don't think personally that the best team that Tony's had at Virginia was a team that put the banner up. Those guys love them. They're going to live in lore forever. I got a sign behind me about a book that we all helped co-write about the championship they won. But I think the best teams he had were the Malcolm Brogdon, Justin Anderson, Joe Harris, London Parentes, Anthony Gill, Mike Tobey teams. I mean, God, and I'm leaving out Darion Atkins and Akil Mitchell. There were a lot of guys on those teams that were NBA quality, pro quality players. I thought this team reminds me of those teams in terms of the versatility, the grit, their offensive abilities, the way they can play defense. Everything about these guys reminds me of those mid 2010s teams. And he's playing to their strengths. He's Reese Beekman. He's unleashing Reese Beekman. He's, Kie Clark has nothing to be ashamed of. He's getting in the lane and doing what he can do. You talked about Caden Shedrick. Man, he hit a 3 last night in the rhythm of the offense. It wasn't an end of shot clock, throw it up and pray, hope it goes in 3. Caden Shedrick, Anthony Gill years ago could have done that kind of thing, just didn't because the offense at that time didn't allow for 4s and 5s to shoot 3s. Ben Vanderplas hit a big 3 last night in the face of a 7-1 guy. So yeah, he is Scott, you're exactly onto it there. He is using his players, his talent to the height of their abilities in a way that he didn't even a few years ago.
Yeah, and if you look at, and it's not going unnoticed. Look at the recruiting. Look at the 4-star players that are in the fold for next year. They're seeing this. This stigma that Tony runs this slow molasses style offense is just not true. I mean, last night the team played with a lot of up tempo, many possessions. If you watch, I mean, you could tell that he's adapting to the personnel that he has on the floor, which is just another example of what a magnificent coach he is. And I know we're biased in that, we're looking through rose-colored glasses, but it'd be hard to argue that he's taking the talent, he's taking the personnel that he has, and he's letting them play to their strengths.
But you know what's interesting about that, Scott? Looking at the numbers here, and I've got them in front of me. Venture a guess, if you didn't look at this already, how many possessions there were in last night's game per team?
I did not look. I did look at stat broadcasts a lot to just look at stat. I'm going to say low 60s.
Yeah, Michigan had 58. Virginia had 60.
Okay.
I mean, this was still Tony Bennett's pace. I mean, it just
looked faster.
It looks faster because the offense is more efficient. I mean, this is his. I'm going to pull up this stat now. Let's see. So this year's team is 5th in the country at the moment in terms of offensive efficiency, 1.168 points per possession. The last team that's been this good was the title team. It was 2nd in the country, 1.234 points per possession back in 2019. Virginia still at this stage ranks 361st in Division I in adjusted tempo. There's 363 teams. It feels different because they're not going through those lulls like we saw the last 2 to 3 years with 4 or 5 minutes at a stretch where not only would a ball not go through the hoop, it didn't even seem like it came close to going through the hoop. I mean, now it seems like, I was watching a game with a friend last night. who said it feels like every time they go up the floor, they're going to score. I mean, and you're surprised when they don't. This reminds me again of that 2019 team and those early, mid 2010s teams, that it felt the same way. When Malcolm Brogdon and Justin Anderson and Joe Harris were on the floor, they're going to score points. When you had Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, and DeAndre Hunter, they were going to score points. These guys feel the same way.
Yeah, and Tony's playing to their strengths. Can you ever remember? Maybe 2019 might be the closest on offense that is this balanced,
right,
where you've got five guys that on any given night there's no reason to believe that any five could lead this team in scoring.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
this reminds me of the 2019 team was the same way.
Right.
Ty Jerome would hit the big shots. We remember DeAndre Hunter hitting some big shots, both at Louisville in a game in 2018, and then of course at the Final Four hitting a 3 to tie it and send it to overtime. Kyle Guy obviously hit a lot of big shots, and then you the guys that I keep mentioning, the guys who are now starting in the NBA, making a lot of money. The Joe Harris's and Malcolm Brogdon's could hit big shots. Yeah, this group literally, So last night, Armand Franklin has 2 points on 1 of 6 shooting. He had 26 in the win over Baylor a couple weeks ago. You don't need him to score 26 every night because there were 5 guys in double figures last night. That's what this team. There's any of 6 guys can lead this team in scoring, and you wouldn't be surprised by it.
No, I would not. I think I was looking at some stuff. I think if you went back to 2014 with Malcolm, Joe Harris, Gill, we haven't mentioned Anderson much.
Yeah, no,
Anderson,
yeah.
Mitchell and Mike Tobey. Yeah, that was a pretty balanced team as well. But this year's team, there's 5 guys out there that can step up offensively, and Tony recognizes that.
And it's surprising to see when I was just flipping through the numbers real quick as you were talking at the efficiency numbers. Those early the team that had 3 NBA players, 1 first round draft pick in Justin Anderson, and then Joe Harris and Malcolm Brogdon, an eventual rookie of the year. They only played together that 1 year in 2013, 2014. I guess they technically played together. Well, let me think. Anderson wouldn't have been part of the team when Malcolm was a freshman because he came in a year later, and then Malcolm had to sit out a redshirt year with that injury. So that group, those 3 guys only played together 1 year. They were ranked 21st in the country in offensive efficiency. Those 3 guys, 2 of whom are making lots of money in the NBA, and Justin Anderson has been on the fringe, unfortunately for him, for a number of years, but he's still out there plying his trade. Those guys were nowhere near as efficient as the guys on the floor right now for Virginia. I think we need to throw a nod to the defense too, because you wrote a nice column. Virginia gave up 45 points in the first half. And, as I'm watching with my little watch party here at the home office, I'm saying that's not going to continue. Michigan's not going to score 90 in this game. But that said, Virginia held Michigan to 23 in the second half. In the first half, 1.4 points per possession. Second half, 0.8 points per possession for Michigan. They shot 38% in the second half after shooting 61% in the first half. They were 7 of 13 in the first half from 3, 1 of 6 in the second half from 3.
Doesn't that tell you something? 13 first half 3-point shot, 6 in the second.
Only 6 attempts, yeah.
Only 6 attempts. They took 1 less attempt in the second half than they made in the first half.
And at the same time, Virginia was just as efficient as they were in the first half. And because Virginia had a hot shooting first half, had a good second half as well. But it's because Tony said, I want to let you help tell the story, but he basically said, we got to be grittier than this. I mean, I loved how he quoted his dad in reference to what they needed to do.
Yeah. And on the post-game show last night, that's what he said. He quoted his dad, "It's time to take the tuxedos off." and realize that, hey, we're playing big, we're playing in the Big Ten, we're playing a Big Ten opponent, and we're okay playing. That's who we really are. We can play that. We can play that style of game. Let's play it. And that's, I think I titled, that was the caption. They had a wardrobe change at halftime because they came out with the tuxedos off and the calf heart uniforms on, the work uniforms. or the Dickies or whatever you want to call them. They came out playing physical basketball, and you could just see the difference. Didn't take Naismith or John Wooden to look at that game last night and just see that was a different Virginia team from a physicality standpoint in the second half. And when they were down by 11, I hadn't looked at stat broadcasts. I was up watching on TV, and I thought, I got to go over and just look at stat broadcasts to see if there's anything there statistically, because we're both kind of analytical geeks is there anything statistically that would indicate Virginia could make a comeback in this game? And the first thing that jumped out, and I knew they were shooting well. Oh, Michigan 7 of 13 from the 3-point line. If we can snuff that out, we can get right back in this game. And it didn't take but a couple of minutes to chip away at that 11-point lead. And Michigan came into the game. I was reading the story prior to their game. They weren't a real good 3-point shooting team. They were only 30%.
Right.
So they were shooting way above their capabilities against a very good defensive team. So I thought, if Tony can make some adjustments, if the team comes out and they start playing a little better defensively, deny some of those 3-point shots. Some of them were contested, but others looked like they're pretty good looking shots. Then we're going to get back into this game. And that's exactly the way the game unfolded.
Got to give credit to Ben Vanderplas, because we talked about the foul trouble that Francisco Cafaro had 4 fouls in 4 minutes of play. It ended up that Caden Shedrick fouled out of the game. He had a nice offensive game, 11 points on 5 of 6 shooting. But the big guy for Michigan was just so tough. Hunter Dickinson was just so tough as a guard. He's going to be an NBA player. He's got, he kind of reminds me of Dovidas Sabonis, who's now plays with the Sacramento Kings, former Indiana Pacer. Left-handed guy with a good mid-range jump shot, can score at the basket, can score away from the basket. He's a really good passer, and he's a matchup problem. He obviously was, because he created all those fouls for Virginia's starting center and backup center. And so Ben Vanderplas pressed into action because there's nobody else behind them. I mean, not a lot of teams carry 3, 6'10", 7-foot guys, and Virginia's not going to be doing that. Not a lot of NBA teams carry that many of those size guys anymore. And so Vanderplas is 6'8", who's a stretch 4. He's a guy that he's just as adept running off screens and hitting threes as he is playing in the post. He's given up 5 inches and some poundage too to this Dickinson kid. And I wouldn't say he stopped him, but he made him work for his points. And let me actually look at those stats. In the first half, Dickinson had 14 points on 7 of 10 shooting. Second half, he had 9 points, but he was 2 of 7 from the field. And that just, in a lot of those minutes, he was being guarded by a guy much smaller than him. Ben Vanderplas stepped up last night in a big way.
And I expect that to happen a lot this year. I think he's going to have some great opportunities. And I think he's very comfortable being that 6th man, if that's the way it unfolds for the rest of the year. As I said, I think he's going to be our Brady Mannix this year to Carolina for what Mannix did for Carolina. So I'm going to change the subject quickly. Going back to last year, towards the end of the season, Augusta Free Press, we were at the game, and we kind of broke the news early to folks that, hey, Kie Clark's coming back.
Uh-huh.
When there was a ton of debate is he coming back or is he not? And we kind of knew the story of that well before it was finally released. This could potentially be Kie Clark's best year, because he's finally being able to play the role that's best suited to him. And don't you think that was what Tony and Kie when they sat down and talked about that? That's, to me now, looking back, that's probably what Coach Bennett and Kie talked about, is your role is going to be different next year. And to me, thinking back and now looking ahead at what he's done so far, They knew exactly what him returning to Virginia could be this year.
I'm looking at his numbers now. Yeah, his scoring is 9.5 points a game. He's not being asked. The Virginia has 4 guys averaging in double figures. In fact, you talk about balance on this team. Reese Beekman, Armand Franklin, both averaging 11.8. Jaden Gardner, 11.5. Caden Shedrick, 11.3. And then Vanderplas averaging 8.5. There's a lot of balance on this Virginia offense from that standpoint. But so Kihei's not having to shoulder a load like he had to the last couple of years. And he's averaging 5 assists a game. His turnovers are at 1.7, so that's down from where it's been. He's not having to create as much as he'd had in the past. I'm going to look at his career numbers there. When you look at his season numbers for the last few seasons, boy, in 2019, 2020, if you remember that year, that's the year that, there was basically no offense that year. A lot of Virginia wins in the 40s that year with that team. He averaged 3.5 turnovers per game because he was being asked to create everything. Even last year, 2.2. He's down to 1.7 now. He's shooting 41.9% from the field, which would be a career high for him if it were to hold. He's shooting 44.4% from 3, which will be by far a career high. It would be 7 points higher than his career high. So he's more efficient. And as a result, a lot better player. And that's not even counting what he does on defense. That's just talking about what he does offensively. So, my wife sits in a part of JPJ where she says 2 rows behind her are apparently 2 of the leaders of the Key Haters fan club, the people who hate Kihei Clark. And every time he does anything that they think is wrong, these people sigh loudly, talk loudly about why is this kid here? Why is he still playing? He's ruining the team. And Scott, I think your point is valid. He's a big reason why that 2019 team won a national championship. This might be his best year.
Absolutely. And they knew that. And Coach Bennett knew that. And Kie knew that. And that was factored into his desire to come back for another season. And, I read something once. Well, he's only at his best when he's surrounded by talent.
Okay. Who isn't?
Who does that not apply to? That applies to King James. When you think that LeBron James is not at his best right now because he doesn't have any talent around him.
Well, it's from a win-loss standpoint, he's not. No, and I'm thinking about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is supposedly the next big NBA star. He's unfortunately for him stuck in Oklahoma City with nobody around him. So no, it's hard to be a star by yourself, and especially when you're a point guard who you can't pass it to yourself. You can't pass it to a wide. Kihei Clark can't drive the lane and pass to a wide open Kihei Clark on the perimeter. You need guys to kick it out to, and for Reese Beekman the same way. No doubt. I think the only problem I see with this season, Scott, is that I think Reese Beekman is playing himself into not having a senior season at Virginia because I think the young man is finally tapping into his potential. After this season, I foresee a testing of the NBA draft waters and then an answer coming back to him. Stay in the draft. You're a first-round pick.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're probably right, and that's okay.
That's okay.
I'll take that. If he has a career, if he has a season that lends him to being a first-round NBA pick, then we're probably going to end up in the Final Four.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not. We're not going to be an early exit in the NCAA tournament and Reese Beekman be a first-round draft pick. That's just not going to happen.
I think that's the reason you're seeing Tony really putting a premium for the 2024. Recruiting class, I guess 2023 recruiting class too, to see if he can find a point guard. If he can scrunch up a point guard somewhere. Isaac McNeely can play it, but Reese Beekman is finally tapping into. I've been saying this for 3 years. His inner Malcolm Brogdon. We saw it last night. We saw it in the Illinois game too. When Virginia needs a basket to shut down a run by the other team. Reese Beekman, he hit a 3 last night in rhythm. He drove to the basket several times and got nice hard layups. That one dunk that we saw that was showing off his athleticism. He comes back hurt after spraining his ankle, having to get it taped up, having to go run in the tunnel to see if he can even put weight on his foot. He makes the steal of the game when the margin's 1 point, and he steals the ball and gets fouled. makes one of the 2 free throws. K.A. Clark then on the subsequent possession after the intentional foul call makes 2 more free throws. That play is what sealed the game last night. A guy who's playing 75% because he's got a foot injury. Reese Beekman willed his team to win last night. He was one of the few guys who did that for his team last night. But man, oh man, he is starting to play like the guy that we've known he could be when he first walked on grounds.
Yeah, he definitely is. And yeah, if he turns out to be, if he ends his season as a first round draft pick, then great. That's just it means we've had a pretty special season.
That's
In my story, I said the team ball last night should have went to trainer Ethan Saliba.
Yeah.
I mean, from what little they show, if you go to YouTube, there's another video of it. Cedric, I don't know if it was I think it was his mouth, wasn't it?
It looked like, he looked like he took a blow to the nose and mouth area right there, maybe the bridge of the nose. So it got a little bit of the nose and a little bit of the mouth, but he looked like he was in an MMA match.
He was gushing blood. And for Ethan to close that wound and get him back in the game, and Beekman, the tape job on Beekman, the pit crew at a NASCAR event would have been proud of that. The guys that changed the 4 tires in about 4.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Beekman was, I was thinking that's it. He's going to go in the tunnel and that's the last you're going to see of him.
Yeah.
But,
especially seeing that replay, he landed awkwardly on a guy's foot. I've done that numerous times. Scott, you probably have too, playing pickup ball. That hurts. And the work on Caden Shedrick reminded me of like a good cut man in a corner in a boxing match.
right.
I mean, that's not easy work. And the variety of things you have. If you're a cut man in a boxing corner, you're pretty much focusing on cuts. If you're a trainer on for a basketball team, you don't know what they're going to come to you with. And 2 big situations there. Yeah, game ball to him, to the wardrobe people who took the tuxedos off the guys at halftime.
The planning to make sure we had uniforms to change into, right?
The support staff there had to be thinking ahead as we travel to Ann Arbor. And so as we get ready to wrap up here, man, the win last night, huge win. Virginia's got Florida State this weekend. Yes, Florida State's 1-7 on the season right now. They're still Florida State. We still remember last February, Virginia making a run towards a possible NCAA tournament berth. That 3-pointer at the buzzer from about 40 feet. I don't think I've ever heard 15,600 people ever more quiet in my life, because that just kind of, you knew in that moment when that ball went through the net, we're not going to make the NCAA tournament. And so there's a little bit of payback there probably owed, and maybe we can see if Virginia can give that back. And then coming up on Tuesday, a special kind of payback for the folks from JMU after
that game may not be fit. That game may be R-rated from the standpoint. I don't look for Tony to be pulling starters very, very early in that game.
Well, let's give JMU some credit. I just looked it up. They're in KenPom. They're 79th in the country right now. They played Carolina tough, lost by 16, but that game was a lot closer than the final score to indicate. So, I mean, but the folks who don't remember, there was a FU Tony chant for some reason. I mean,
for what reason?
Here, Tony Bennett brings Virginia to your arena. He didn't have to.
Virginia will probably be the last time Tony Bennett ever brings
to that arena. Yeah, I mean, but he doesn't have to. He could be like Duke. Duke never plays anybody in November and December on their court. They play a couple neutral court games and they play in Durham. Tony makes it a point. He's played at George Mason. He's played, he'll go to VCU. That wasn't the 2018, 2019.
And that was another game that wasn't faint for the heart. I mean, I heard that the fans were pretty.
Nah, I was there. It was VCU. I love the environment. It was a great environment. He'll play. He went to JMU and never do that again. But he makes it a point to go and play these games because he played at Wisconsin Green Bay, and he said he remembered that no one would play them in their gym. So he wants to go and play the mid majors on their court every once in a while. But honestly, folks, he's doing you a favor. And if he does you a favor and you say F you, Tony, he ain't doing any more favors for you. And next week's game, let's hope there's a little bit of stepping on the throat, which would be rare for Tony to want to do. But we're going to be sitting around there waiting to see some of that going on next Tuesday night.
Yeah. 3 games in a row. All 3 teams beat us last year.
Yeah, because the Houston game's after the break. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so you don't want to count any chickens, but win the next two, which you'll be favored to do so rather heavily. Then the game after the exam break is at least 1 versus 3, if not 1 versus 2, if Virginia can accede to the number 2 spot by then. So only the biggest non-conference game probably ever played in JPJ.
Yeah, I agree. And boy, I tell you what, it could be. I mean, if Houston holds serve, I said earlier in our phone call, Houston is playing the gauntlet of Virginia schools. They got past Norfolk State last night. Now they've got Virginia in a couple of weeks. So
Yeah,
they barely, they beat Georgia Tech or Norfolk State last night in a squeaker, 100-52. So
yeah, they're hoping to stake a claim to the state championship of Virginia if they can win uh, here in a couple weeks. But
so if you're holding any tickets to that Houston game, you may be better off than if you're going out and play the lottery,
I will tell you, yeah, my wife has 2 season tickets, and one of our really smart friends back when this friend learned that there was 2 season tickets in her hands. Hey, can I be the person to go to the Houston game with you? And now everybody's like, "Hey, can I be the one to go?" I'm sorry. This young man said back in October, or maybe it was even further back than that, he wanted to go. You got to think ahead on these kind of things, man. You got to look ahead. We knew Virginia was going to be good. We knew Houston was going to be good.
Hey,
I don't think
it's like playing the stock market. You gotta look at some sleeper stocks and you gotta take a chance on them. I would have thought Houston would have been a sleeper stock, but
Virginia's side of it, yeah. We had a top 20 matchup. We knew back in October this was a top 20 matchup. 1 versus 2, perhaps. No. So
very likely.
Yeah, and this will remind you of Ralph versus Akeem. I mean, this is Fa Jamma and Terry Holland and everything. This will bring back some good memories. So
even if Texas holds serve, the voters are kind of keen to those kinds of things. And if Houston holds serve, it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden the voters looked at it a little differently and flip-flop Texas and Virginia.
Yeah, there's some things coming up here. So we got to be Florida State, got to be JMU. But a nice win for Virginia last night. So, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thanks for listening to the show, and thanks Scott German, of course, for your time and your insight. And if anybody has any questions, email me at chris@augustafreepress.com. Of course, all of our coverage of UVA sports and the rest of the world at augustafreepress.com. And I'll be signing off here. Everyone have a great day.